Your real well-being and happiness depend entirely on your inner state. Why should anything that happens outside of you distract you so greatly? There's a moment in every life when you realize the mirror holds more truth than any conversation you've had in years. For me, it happened on a Tuesday evening when I was 74, sitting in my quiet kitchen after yet another phone call that left me feeling smaller than before. The voice on the other end belonged to someone I'd spent decades trying to please, someone whose approval I'd chased like a moth drawn to flame, only to discover that the light was always moving just out of reach. That night, as the dial tone hummed in the empty room, something clicked into place with the finality of a door closing forever. I understood, perhaps for the first time in my entire life, that I had been looking for myself in all the wrong places. In other people's opinions, in their needs, in their fleeting presence that came and went like seasons I couldn't control. I had been measuring my worth by how desperately others seemed to need me, how much they called, how often they visited, how deeply they appeared to care. And in that measurement, I had lost sight of the one constant in my entire existence, myself. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full of a truth I'd been avoiding for decades. Happiness isn't something other people give you or take away. It lives inside you, waiting patiently for you to stop looking elsewhere and finally come home to your own heart. This revelation didn't arrive gently. It struck me with the force of lightning illuminating a landscape I'd been stumbling through in darkness for 74 years. If you've lived long enough to accumulate silver in your hair and wisdom in your bones, you've probably discovered this painful truth about human nature. People come and go with the unpredictability of weather patterns. The friend who promised to always be there moves across the country and stops calling. The family member you sacrificed everything for becomes too busy with their own life to remember your birthday. The lover who swore eternal devotion finds someone younger, more interesting, more convenient. This isn't cynicism speaking, it's reality delivered with the brutal honesty that only comes with age and experience. When you're young, you believe in forever. You believe that love conquers all, that loyalty is permanent, that the people who matter will always matter in the same way. You build your entire sense of self around these relationships, these connections that feel as solid as stone but turn out to be as fragile as autumn leaves. I spent decades of my life pouring myself into others like water into a leaky bucket, watching my essence drain away while convincing myself that this was what love looked like. I believed that my value was directly proportional to how much others needed me, how much I could give, how completely I could disappear into their requirements and expectations. I thought that if I just loved hard enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, the people I cared about would stay forever. The mathematics of this equation never worked, but I kept trying to solve it anyway. Every time someone left, I told myself I hadn't given enough. Every time someone disappointed me, I convinced myself I hadn't been understanding enough. Every time someone treated me poorly, I decided I hadn't been worthy enough. I turned every relationship failure into evidence of my own inadequacy rather than seeing it for what it was, the natural ebb and flow of human connection. What nobody tells you when you're busy losing yourself in other people is that this pattern of seeking external validation becomes a prison of your own making. You become so accustomed to defining yourself through other people's eyes that you forget how to see yourself clearly. You become so dependent on their presence for your happiness that their absence feels like a kind of death. You become so focused on being what they need that you lose track of who you actually are. The cruelest irony is that the more desperately you cling to people, the more likely they are to pull away. There is something suffocating about being someone's entire source of meaning, just as there's something exhausting about making someone else your whole world. Healthy relationships require two complete people choosing to share their fullness, not two empty vessels trying to fill each other up. I learned this lesson the hardest way possible, by watching every relationship I'd built on need rather than choice eventually crumble under the weight of my expectations. The marriage that ended because I'd become someone I didn't recognize in my desperate attempt to be the perfect wife. The friendships that faded because I'd given so much of myself away that there was nothing interesting left to offer. The family relationships that became strained because my love felt more like obligation than joy. The turning point came not with fanfare, but with exhaustion. I simply got tired of the constant emotional roller coaster that came with making other people responsible for my well-being. Tired of feeling devastated every time someone was too busy to call. Tired of feeling worthless every time someone chose something else over spending time with me. Tired of feeling angry every time someone failed to appreciate the sacrifices I'd made for them. In that bone-deep weariness, I found something unexpected. Relief. Relief from the endless performance of trying to be what others wanted. Relief from the constant anxiety of wondering if I was enough. Relief from the crushing responsibility of making other people happy. For the first time in decades, I had space to breathe, to think, to remember who I was before I became obsessed with who others wanted me to be. The process of learning to focus on yourself after a lifetime of focusing on everyone else is like learning to walk again after being bedridden for years. Your muscles have atrophied from disuse. Your balance is uncertain. Every step feels foreign and potentially dangerous. You've forgotten how to trust your own legs to carry you where you want to go. But slowly, tentatively, you begin to remember. You rediscover interests you abandoned because they didn't fit into someone else's life plan. You reconnect with parts of yourself that you buried because they weren't what others needed from you. You start making decisions based on what feels right to you rather than what might please someone else. You begin the revolutionary act of living your own life instead of auditioning for a role in someone else's story. This isn't about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about becoming self-aware and self-sufficient. It's about learning the difference between love and dependency, between caring and controlling, between being needed and being valued. It's about understanding that you can only give to others from a full cup, and you can only fill your own cup by taking responsibility for your own emotional well-being. The most profound shift happens when you stop seeing other people's departure as a reflection of your worth and start seeing it as information about compatibility, circumstances, or simply the natural flow of life. Some people leave because they've outgrown the relationship. Some leave because their life has taken them in a different direction. Some leave because they were never really present to begin with, and you were just too hopeful to notice. None of these departures say anything definitive about your value as a human being. They say something about timing, about fit, about the complex dance of human connection that doesn't always work out the way we hope. When you understand this deeply, really accept it in your bones, you stop taking everyone's choices so personally. You stop making their presence or absence the measure of your worth. What emerges in this space is something remarkable. Genuine self-love. Not the manufactured kind that comes from positive thinking or affirmations, but the real kind that grows from actually knowing yourself and choosing to honor what you find there. The kind that appreciates your own company and doesn't desperately seek to fill every quiet moment with someone else's voice. The kind that sees your own life as worthy of care and attention, regardless of who else is paying attention. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without grief. You have to mourn the version of yourself that believed love meant disappearing into other people. You have to grieve the relationships that couldn't survive your decision to stop being whoever others needed you to be. You have to say goodbye to the fantasy that if you just tried hard enough, you could make people stay forever. But on the other side of that grief lies something precious. Freedom. Freedom from the exhausting work of trying to control other people's feelings and choices. Freedom from the constant anxiety of wondering if you're enough. Freedom from the resentment that builds when you give more than you receive. Freedom to be authentic, to change, to grow, to disappoint people if necessary, to live according to your own values rather than everyone else's expectations. When you finally understand that your happiness truly does depend on your inner state rather than external circumstances, everything changes. The phone call that doesn't come doesn't devastate you anymore. It simply is what it is. The friend who drifts away doesn't destroy your self-worth. They just weren't meant to be part of your story forever. The family member who takes you for granted doesn't send you into a spiral of self-doubt. They reveal something about their own limitations, not yours. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to other people or stop caring about relationships. Instead, you learn to care from a place of strength rather than neediness. You learn to love without trying to control. You learn to give without keeping score. You learn to connect without losing yourself in the process. You discover that the relationships that survive this transformation are the ones worth having. Connections based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation rather than obligation or habit. The people who truly belong in your life will stay not because you've made yourself indispensable, but because they genuinely enjoy your company. They'll value your thoughts, appreciate your perspective, and respect your boundaries. They'll show up not because they have to, but because they want to. And when life temporarily pulls them in different directions, they'll find their way back because the connection is real, not manufactured. Learning to focus on yourself doesn't make you lonely. It makes you selective. It helps you distinguish between people who add value to your life and people who simply fill space. It teaches you to invest your emotional energy in relationships that are reciprocal and nourishing rather than one-sided and draining. It shows you the difference between being alone and being lonely, between solitude and isolation. The greatest gift you can give yourself in your later years is the realization that you are complete on your own, not broken without a partner, not worthless without constant validation, not invisible without someone else's attention. Complete, whole, valuable in your own right, worthy of your own time, energy, and affection, deserving of a life that brings you joy, regardless of who else is or isn't part of it. This understanding becomes the foundation for everything else. When you know your own worth, you stop settling for relationships that diminish you. When you enjoy your own company, you stop desperately seeking others to fill the silence. When you take responsibility for your own happiness, you stop making other people responsible for your emotional well-being. When you love yourself genuinely, you stop needing others to prove your lovability. The irony is that becoming someone who doesn't need others often makes you more attractive to the right people. There's something magnetic about someone who is genuinely content with their own life, who has interests and passions that don't revolve around pleasing others, who can offer companionship without desperation or neediness. This kind of self-possession draws people who are also complete in themselves, creating the possibility for relationships that are truly fulfilling rather than merely functional. But even if no one else ever shows up, even if you spend the rest of your days in relative solitude, you'll be okay. More than okay, you'll be free. Free to pursue what interests you, to spend your time as you choose, to create a life that reflects your values and preferences rather than someone else's expectations. Free to change your mind, to try new things, to be imperfect, to prioritize your own well-being without feeling guilty about it. The years you have left, however many they may be, belong to you, not to your children who've grown up and moved on with their own lives, not to friends who may or may not stay in touch, not to family members who may or may not appreciate what you've given them, not to a society that may or may not value your contributions. To you, they belong to you, and you get to decide how to spend them. You can waste them waiting for other people to validate your existence, or you can use them to finally live according to your own truth. You can spend them bitter about all the people who've left, or you can spend them grateful for your own company. You can use them to rehearse old grievances, or you can use them to write new chapters that have nothing to do with anyone else's story. The choice is yours, and it's a choice you get to make fresh every morning when you wake up. You can decide to focus on who's missing from your life, or you can focus on who's present, namely, you. You can spend your energy trying to convince people to stay who've already decided to go, or you can spend it cultivating a relationship with the one person who will definitely be with you until the end, yourself. This isn't about giving up on human connection or becoming a hermit. It's about creating a foundation of self-love and self-respect that makes you immune to other people's coming and going. It's about building a life so rich and meaningful that other people's presence becomes a wonderful addition rather than a desperate necessity. It's about learning to be your own best friend, your own cheerleader, your own source of comfort and encouragement. When you truly understand that people come and go, but you remain constant in your own life, you stop living at the mercy of everyone else's choices. You stop making their love conditional on your worth. You stop making their presence necessary for your happiness. You start living from the inside out rather than the outside in, and everything becomes different. The relationships you choose to maintain become conscious choices rather than desperate attachments. The time you spend alone becomes peaceful rather than painful. The decisions you make become aligned with your own values rather than driven by fear of abandonment. The life you create becomes authentically yours rather than a series of attempts to please others. And perhaps most importantly, you become someone worth knowing, not because you've made yourself useful to others, but because you've become interesting to yourself. You develop your own thoughts, pursue your own interests, cultivate your own wisdom. You become someone who has something genuine to offer, not because you're trying to earn love, but because you have love to spare from the abundance you've created within yourself. For those of you who are younger and might be listening to these words, thinking this wisdom doesn't apply to you yet, please consider this a gentle warning wrapped in love. Don't wait until you're 74 to discover that your happiness lives inside you. Don't spend decades making other people responsible for your emotional well-being. Don't lose yourself so completely in others that you forget who you are when you're alone. Learn early what it took me a lifetime to understand, that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. Nurture it, protect it, invest in it. Make it so strong and so loving that other people's presence becomes a gift rather than a necessity. Their love becomes a bonus rather than a requirement. Their approval becomes nice to have rather than essential for your survival. Your worth isn't negotiable. Your value isn't up for debate. Your right to happiness isn't contingent on anyone else's participation. You were born complete, and you remain complete regardless of who chooses to journey alongside you for whatever distance they're able to travel. Remember this when the world tries to convince you otherwise. Remember this when people leave. Remember this when you're tempted to lose yourself in someone else's story. You are enough exactly as you are, right where you are, with or without anyone else's agreement. Focus on you. Build a life you love. Create joy that doesn't depend on external validation. Become someone you genuinely enjoy spending time with. Everything else is just decoration on a life that was already beautiful before anyone else arrived and will remain beautiful long after they've gone.